Causes of poverty in India. The latest report from the World Bank paints a depressing picture of poverty in India, with nearly 5% of the country's population living on less than $1.90 US per day. In this blog, we look at the causes of poverty in India, such as lack of affordable healthcare and medical assistance, poor education standards, and malnutrition. Poverty in India caused by corruption. Despite efforts from the Indian government to eradicate poverty, India's impoverished population continues to grow. Rising debt, along with an increase in crime and other significant issues, have led to a growing demand for economic change by the lower classes in order to alleviate extreme poverty. A person is defined as living in poverty if he or she lives in a household that is unable to afford basic food or shelter. In India, 65% of the population lives below the poverty line, and 20% live in extreme poverty. This has been caused by corruption from officials and bribery. Poverty in India caused by a lack of good jobs. It shows that poverty in India is caused by a lack of good jobs and low wages, which then causes hunger, disease, and malnutrition. We recognize the difference between developed and developing countries, however, a global trend is that people are becoming poorer. As I mentioned earlier, out of 1.3 billion people in India, there is almost a quarter live in poverty. Due to things like lack of jobs, resources, access to education, and opportunity, they are unable to break away from this cycle of poverty. Many families live in single-room dwellings, which are very close together. Poverty is the lack of an adequate standard of living that threatens a person's health and well-being and social exclusion. The concept of poverty can be applied to the individual or family or apply to an entire country. Its causes are often related to factors including unemployment, discrimination, poor governance, and policies. Poverty in India caused by weather/climate change. This term refers to a condition of deprivation, which includes having limited access to basic human needs, such as food and shelter. Significant numbers of people in India, up to 67% according to some estimates, are living in poverty. The main factors that contribute to this are economic inequality, underdeveloped infrastructure, and increasing catastrophes caused by climate change. At present, the biggest poverty issue in India is not the pace of GDP growth but climate change, which adversely affects crop yields. Cold-stunned crops like rabi chickpea, gram, in Haryana and South Punjab, rice in Assam and Bengal, groundnut, peanut, in Maharashtra, and Bt cotton or paddy are all examples of such sensitivity. Since Indian agriculture is highly vulnerable to weather shocks, any rise in temperature due to rapid climate change could have an adverse impact. The growing season for agriculture is getting prolonged for many crops, and the time taken for harvesting will increase, both of which will have multiple effects on the food supply. Poverty in India caused by social injustice. The poverty status in India has been a significant concern. According to the World Bank, a staggering 32.7% of people live below the poverty level in India. Social injustice and political factors in the country are two significant causes of widespread poverty in India. Poverty is an economic situation where people lack the resources to obtain the basic necessities of life. Most of the developing nations have been facing significant problems of poverty. According to World Bank, it was stated that 1.3 billion people are living on less than $1.25 a day, and nearly 2 billion people are living on less than $2 a day. Poverty in India is mainly due to social injustice, gender inequality, and lack of employment opportunities for rural masses. Poverty in India caused by a lack of food and water. India has one of the highest rates of poverty in the world, with a quarter of its population living on less than 50 cents per day. Poverty in India is primarily rural and more prevalent among women and children. India's widespread poverty is caused mainly by the lack of food, clean water, proper clothing, and shelter. Poverty is the lack of elements considered essential by basic standards of living. It includes access to safe drinking water, adequate healthcare and shelter, nutritional food, clothing, and energy services. The most extreme form of poverty is starvation. More than 1 billion people, or nearly 1/6 of the developing world, live below India's official poverty line of $1 a day on purchasing power parity. Causes of poverty are hard to understand, but we all need to work together to control these causes. Poverty in India caused by a lack of government support. The average monthly income for an average Indian citizen is $30, which is far from enough to cover basic living expenses. There are many types of poverty in India: poverty of education, health and nutrition, congestion, unemployment, illiteracy, and lack of capital. However, all of these root causes boil down to the lack of government support. In rural areas, farmers struggle to earn enough to pay for their children's education. In urban areas, there are too many people put into small spaces, causing disease and illness to spread quickly. In India, there are still vast areas of poverty due to a lack of government support. Over the last 50 years, India has seen a rise in people living below the poverty line, with 43.5% of people below it, according to a 2011 to 2012 survey. The average monthly income was calculated as 100 rupees, $2 in rural areas and $3 in urban areas. A majority of poor households earn less than 1,500 rupees per month, the equivalent of $30, which is not enough to provide for basic needs. Causes of poverty are important to know so that we can control them. Poverty in India caused by inequality. The poor in India suffer from the consequences of a powerful undercurrent that threatens to drown them in inequality. The extremely wealthy and the inferior face different economic situations because of the differences in their wealth. The rich have excess money while the poor are left with just enough to survive. Oppressed by this system, the poor in India try to break free of it any way they can. Hence, oppression weighs down on them, making their position worse and worse with time. The country of India is currently facing issues from the brutally ineffective system of caste-based discrimination and social hierarchy going as far back as 500 BC, known as the caste system. This ancient practice resulted in thousands upon thousands of people creating a poverty-stricken community of nearly bottomless depths. Based on your birth, or caste ranking, everyone in this community was expected to follow rigid rules to make sure they remained where they were assigned to be forever, resulting in a poverty-stricken community that hasn't seen any progress since its creation. Causes of poverty in India. Poverty in India caused by lack of education. A devastating 60% of India is living in poverty. The immediate cause is a lack of education and, in some cases, help to enter the job market once they have completed their studies. Each year more than 4 million children finish primary school but never go on to secondary school. Many drop out and soon fall into poverty, marrying young and having lots of children. Poverty in India is primarily a result of illiteracy. Many people living in poverty do not have the skills and education needed to earn a good living. The cycle of poverty it perpetuates can often be seen as families living in villages without proper shelter, clothing, and food.